The massive ship Eternal Vigil moved through space like a sleeping giant. Inside its metal halls, archivist Morthek checked his star charts one more time. After traveling for 300 years, they were finally close to their destination, Sol 3, the third planet from a yellow star that humans called the Sun. Morthek stretched his long gray arms and looked at the ancient records on his screen. 500,000 years ago, his people had visited this small world. They had found simple creatures living in caves using stone tools to hunt animals. The creatures were called humans, and they seemed no different from thousands of other primitive species the Velthari had catalogued across the galaxy. "Archivist," came a voice from behind him. Morthek turned to see Kethavar, the ship's xenobiologist, walking toward his station. Kethavar's large black eyes reflected worry. "Our sensors are picking up strange readings from the Sol system." Morthek felt his stomach twist. Strange readings were never good news on survey missions. "What kind of strange readings?" Kethavar activated a holographic display above Morthek's desk. The image showed the Sol system, with its 8 planets orbiting their star. But something was wrong. Very wrong. These structures, Kethavar pointed to several bright spots around the 4th planet. They appear to be artificial, and these energy signatures near the 3rd planet are impossible. Morthek stared at the display. The energy readings were stronger than anything their own ship could produce. "This must be a sensor error. Run the diagnostic again." "I've run it 12 times, Kethavar said quietly. "The readings are consistent. There are also organized radio transmissions coming from multiple points in the system." The door to the archive room opened with a soft hiss and Zul'Dain entered. The military observer was tall even by Velthari standards, with deep scars across his face from battles in the Outer Rim. "Are you two seeing what I'm seeing on the tactical displays?" Morthek looked up at the warrior. "What are you seeing?" "Structures. Massive ones, orbiting not just the 3rd planet but several others. And..." Zul'Dain paused, his voice becoming uncertain. "And there are ships. Thousands of them." Kethavar's eyes widened. "Ships? But the humans we observed were barely able to make fire. How could they have ships in space?" Morthek felt a cold chill run down his spine. In all his years as an archivist, he had never encountered anything like this. Species took millions of years to develop space travel. The fastest development on record was the Klaxons, who took 800,000 years to go from stone tools to their first orbital flight. "Perhaps another species arrived here after we left," Morthek suggested, though he didn't believe his own words. "Maybe they colonized this system." Zul'Dain shook his head. "The transmissions were picking up. They're in the same language patterns we recorded from the humans 500,000 years ago. It's evolved, changed, but the root structure is the same." The 3 Velthari stood in silence, staring at the impossible data. Their ship's computers continued to analyze the signals, breaking down the complex radio waves into understandable information. What they found made no sense. The transmissions spoke of trade routes between planets, of mining operations in asteroid belts, of colonies on distant moons. The primitive cave dwellers they had left behind were discussing technology that even the Velthari were still trying to perfect. "Sir," came another voice from the ship's intercom. It was Navtar, their communications officer. "We're receiving a direct transmission. It's addressed to us specifically." Morthek's blood froze. "Put it through." A new voice filled the archive room. It spoke in broken, ancient Velthari, the words pronounced carefully as if the speaker had learned them from old recordings. "Welcome back to Sol System, travelers from distant stars. We are humans of Earth. We have been expecting your return. Please state your intentions and prepare for escort to Luna Station for formal greeting." The 3 Velthari exchanged looks of pure shock. Not only had the humans somehow developed space travel, but they had been expecting their return. How was that possible? Zul'Dain was the first to speak. "They have defense systems. I'm reading weapon signatures that are..." He paused, checking his instruments twice. "That are more advanced than ours." Kethavar sat heavily in a nearby chair. "This violates everything we know about evolution. Everything We know about technological development. It's impossible. Morthek tried to process what was happening. 500,000 years was nothing in galactic terms. It was barely a blink of an eye for civilizations. Yet somehow these humans had not only survived, but had become a spacefaring species. Navtar, Morthek called through the intercom. Respond to their transmission. Tell them we come in peace, seeking knowledge and cultural exchange. Already done, sir, Navtar replied. They're sending coordinates for an approach vector, and sir, they're using gravitational wave communication. That's technology we've only theorized about. Morthek felt dizzy. Gravitational wave communication was beyond even Velthari science. It required manipulation of space-time itself. How had a species that was hitting rocks together 500,000 years ago learned to bend the fabric of reality? As their ship began its approach to Earth, Morthek pulled up the old survey records, images of humans living in caves, making crude spears, gathering berries. The most advanced technology they had observed was the controlled use of fire. Look at this, Kethvar said, pointing to the current sensor readings. They have structures in space that are kilometers long. Energy collection systems that dwarf our own power plants. And these ships approaching us. Through the viewing port, they could see lights moving toward them. As the objects grew closer, Morthek realized they were looking at spacecraft unlike anything in Velthari design philosophy. They were sleek, elegant, and somehow beautiful in a way that touched something deep in his mind. Their approach speed is impossible, Zul'Dane muttered, checking his tactical systems. They're moving faster than our sensors can track, then stopping, instantly. That should turn any living creature inside into paste. Maybe they're not living creatures, Kethvar suggested. Maybe they're artificial intelligences. But as the human ships drew alongside the eternal vigil, they could see through transparent sections in the hulls. There were beings inside. Beings that looked remarkably like the cave-dwelling humans from their ancient records, but standing confidently at control stations that seemed to respond to their thoughts. A new transmission came through, this time in perfect modern Velthari. The voice was warm, friendly, and spoke with an accent that suggested the speaker had learned their language completely in the time it took for the ships to approach. Greetings, friends. I am Admiral Dongsu of the United Earth Space Command. We're honored to welcome you back to our system. We've prepared facilities on Luna for our meeting. Our linguist Hie Jin is excited to speak with you about the evolution of communication. And our xenopsychologist Tai Min has many questions about your culture. Morthek felt his worldview crumbling. Not only had the humans developed faster than light, travel, advanced material science, and gravitational manipulation, but they had also developed xenopsychology. They had been preparing for contact with other species. As the eternal vigil was gently guided toward Luna, Earth's moon, Morthek could see structures there that boggled his mind. Cities under transparent domes, massive industrial complexes, and what appeared to be shipyards where new vessels were being constructed. Archivist, Zul'Dane said quietly, I'm reading energy signatures from Earth itself that suggest a planetary engineering project. They appear to have built a network of satellites that control their weather. Morthek nodded numbly. Weather control was something the Velthari had achieved only on their homeworld, and only after millions of years of development. As they approached the lunar docking facility, Morthek saw something that made him gasp. In the distance, he could see ships that were clearly departing the Sol system at speeds that seemed to violate the basic laws of physics. These humans were not just spacefaring within their own system. They were traveling to other stars. The primitive cave dwellers they had catalogued 500,000 years ago had not just survived. They had become something that challenged everything the Velthari thought they knew about life, evolution, and the universe itself. And somehow, impossibly, they had been waiting for this moment. Admiral Dongsu stood in the observation deck of Luna Station, watching the alien vessel dock with practiced ease. The ship was impressive by the standards of most galactic civilizations, but to human eyes, it looked almost primitive. Its hull was thick and bulky, designed for durability rather than efficiency. The propulsion system left energy trails that human ships had abandoned centuries ago. "Sir," came a voice behind him. Dong-Su turned to see his aide, Commander He-Jin, approaching with a tablet in her hands. "The linguistic analysis is complete. They're speaking an ancient version of their own language, probably unchanged for millions of years. I can understand about 60% of it." Dong-Su smiled. 60% after listening to them for 2 hours, not bad. "Actually, sir, I've been studying their language for much longer than that." Ye-Jin's expression became thoughtful. "We've been monitoring their communications for the past 300 years, ever since our deep space sensors detected their ship approaching. This was typical of human preparation. When the early warning systems had detected the alien vessel, the HFY response had been swift and thorough. Teams of linguists, scientists, and cultural experts had been assembled. Mock first contact scenarios had been run thousands of times. Alternative response plans had been prepared for every possible situation. The door to the observation deck slid open, and Taemin entered. The xenopsychologist looked excited, his eyes bright with curiosity. "Admiral, the psychological profiles are fascinating. These beings appear to think in very linear patterns. Their problem-solving approaches suggest they prefer stability over adaptation." Dong-Su nodded. This matched what human scientists had theorized about older galactic civilizations. Species that had achieved stability tended to maintain it for millions of years, changing very little once they reached a comfortable equilibrium. "Are they ready for the meeting?" Dong-Su asked. "Yes, sir. They seem nervous, which is understandable. From their perspective, they expected to find us still living in caves." Through the viewing port, Dong-Su could see the alien delegation preparing to enter the station. There were 3 of them, tall and gray-skinned, moving with the careful precision of beings who had lived for a very long time. Their equipment looked solid and well-made, but it was clearly designed by minds that valued reliability over innovation. The meeting room had been prepared according to human first contact protocols. The lighting could be adjusted for different visual spectrums. The atmosphere could be modified if needed. Translation systems were standing by, along with cultural experts who could explain human customs if necessary. As the aliens entered the room, Dong-Su felt a moment of historical weight. This was humanity's first official contact with another intelligent species, at least the first time the other species had actually made contact with them. Humans had been aware of various alien civilizations for thousands of years, but had chosen to observe rather than interfere. The lead alien, who introduced himself as Morthek, spoke in his ancient language. He-Jin translated smoothly. "He says they are honored to meet us. He's expressing surprise at our development and wishes to understand how we achieved spaceflight so quickly." Dong-Su smiled and responded, his words being translated back into the alien language. "Please tell him we're honored as well. As for our development, we've simply been busy." The alien called Kethavar stepped forward and began speaking rapidly. His tone seemed urgent, almost desperate. "He wants to know about our propulsion systems," He-Jin translated. "He's asking how we achieved faster-than-light travel without using the standard fold space technology that most species develop." Taemin leaned over to Dong-Su and whispered, "They seem to think there's only one way to achieve FTL travel. Should we explain dimensional folding to them?" Dong-Su considered. This dimensional folding was how humans had initially achieved faster-than-light travel, but that had been replaced by more efficient methods centuries ago. The current human ships used a combination of space-time manipulation and dimensional phasing that allowed them to essentially step outside normal reality for their journeys. "Let's start simple," Dong-Su decided. "Tell them we use dimensional manipulation, but we've improved on the basic concepts." When He-Jin translated this, all 3 aliens began speaking at once. Their voices showed clear excitement mixed with confusion. "They want to know how we improved the technology so quickly," He-Jin said. "The one called Zuldane is asking about our weapon systems. He's detected energy signatures from our ships that he doesn't understand. This was getting into sensitive territory. Human weapons technology was based on quantum manipulation principles that most species took millions of years to develop, if they ever developed them at all. Current human weapons could manipulate matter at the subatomic level, essentially rewriting the basic rules of physics in small areas. Tell them our weapons are defensive in nature, Dongsu said diplomatically. We prefer peaceful solutions to conflicts. The aliens seemed to relax at this, but then Morthek asked a question that made Hyejin pause. What did he say? Dongsu asked. He wants to know if we've encountered other species. He seems to think we should be requesting membership in something called the Galactic Confederation. Dongsu exchanged glances with Taemin. The Galactic Confederation was something humans had been aware of for millennia. It was a loose alliance of older species that governed certain aspects of interstellar relations. Humans had chosen not to join, preferring to handle their own affairs. Tell him we're aware of the Confederation, Dongsu said. We've chosen to focus on our own development for now. This seemed to confuse the aliens even more. Kethvar began speaking rapidly, gesturing toward the viewing port where human ships could be seen moving through space. He's asking about our expansion, Hyejin translated. He wants to know how many star systems we've explored. This was where things might get complicated. Dongsu decided on honesty. Tell him we've established colonies in several thousand systems across multiple galaxies. The effect was immediate. All three aliens stopped talking and stared at him. Morthek said something in a very quiet voice. He says that's impossible, Hyejin translated. He says it takes millions of years to develop intergalactic travel capabilities. Taemin stepped forward. Admiral, perhaps I should explain our developmental philosophy to them. Dongsu nodded, and Taemin began speaking slowly, allowing Hyejin to translate phrase by phrase. We approach development differently than most species. When we encounter a limitation, we don't accept it as permanent. We see it as a problem to solve. Our entire culture is based on continuous growth and adaptation. The aliens listened intently, but their expressions showed they didn't really understand. Zuldain asked a question. He wants to know about our population, Hyejin said. He's asking how many humans exist. Dongsu smiled. The current population is approximately 8 trillion, spread across our various colonies and habitats. This number seemed to stagger the aliens. 8 trillion was more than the total population of most galactic civilizations. For humans, it was just the natural result of expansion and their approach to resource management. Morthek spoke again, his voice sounding strained. He's asking about our lifespan, Hyejin translated. He wants to know how long humans live. This was another sensitive topic. Tell him that death from aging is now optional for humans. Most choose to live indefinitely, transferring their consciousness to new bodies when needed. The aliens began talking among themselves in rapid, urgent tones. Finally, Kethvar asked what sounded like a desperate question. He wants to know how long we've been spacefaring, Hyejin said. Dongsu thought about this. Humans had achieved orbital flight relatively recently but had been manipulating spacetime for much longer than that. Our first orbital flights were about 50,000 years ago. We achieved faster-than-light travel about 40,000 years ago. The silence that followed was profound. Finally, Morthek spoke in a voice barely above a whisper. What did he say? Dongsu asked. Hyejin looked troubled. He said, that's impossible. We took 2 million years to achieve what you did in 10,000. What are you? Dongsu considered how to answer this question. What were humans? They were a species that had refused to accept limitations. They had looked at the universe and decided that every problem had a solution. Every barrier could be overcome. Every impossibility was just a challenge waiting for the right approach. Tell him, Dongsu said finally, that we are what happens when a species decides that impossible is just another word for something that hasn't been solved yet. As Hyejin translated this, the aliens stared at the humans with expressions that mixed awe, fear, and complete incomprehension. They had come expecting to find primitive cave dwellers. Instead, they had found something that challenged everything they thought they knew about life in the universe. Dr. Jiwoo stood in the center of the holographic display chamber, surrounded by three-dimensional images of human civilization spreading across the galaxy. The Velthari delegation watched in stunned silence as star systems lit up in sequence, showing the path of human expansion over the past 50,000 years. This represents our current territory, Jiwoo explained, gesturing to the glowing points of light. We have active colonies in approximately 12,000 star systems across 7 galaxies. Morthek made a sound that the translation system couldn't interpret, but his body language suggested complete disbelief. He spoke rapidly to his companions, then turned back to Jiwoo. He's asking if this display is accurate, Hyejin translated. He says the scale is impossible for any single species. Jiwoo smiled gently. She had spent her career studying alien psychology, and she understood how overwhelming this information must be for minds that thought in terms of millions of years of slow development. The scale is accurate, she confirmed. But perhaps it would be helpful to show you how we achieved this expansion. With a gesture, Jiwoo changed the display to show a timeline of human development. The Velthari delegation leaned forward, trying to understand what they were seeing. Our early expansion was relatively slow, Jiwoo explained. We spent the first 10,000 years after achieving spaceflight exploring our local galactic region, but then we encountered our first major limitation. The display showed human ships reaching the edge of their galaxy, then stopping. We discovered that intergalactic distances were too vast for conventional travel. Even with our improved faster-than-light systems, this barrier would have stopped most species for millions of years. Kethvar asked a question, his tone suggesting he expected this to be the end of the story. He wants to know how long it took you to solve this problem, Hyejin translated. About 300 years, Jiwoo replied casually. The aliens exchanged looks of shock. 300 years was barely an instant in their terms of thinking. We developed dimensional bridging technology, Jiwoo continued. Instead of traveling through normal space, we learned to create temporary passages through higher dimensions. This allowed us to step directly from one galaxy to another. The display showed human ships suddenly appearing in distant galaxies, establishing colonies at impossible speeds. Zuldane spoke urgently, pointing at the display. He's asking about resources, Hyejin said. He wants to know how you supplied such distant colonies. Jiwoo nodded. This was a common concern among older species. We solved the resource problem by learning to convert energy directly into matter. Our colonies don't need supply lines because they can create whatever materials they need from local energy sources. This statement caused all 3 aliens to start talking at once. Their voices rose in what sounded like argument or panic. They're saying it's impossible, Hyejin translated. They say matter-energy conversion on that scale violates fundamental laws of physics. Actually, Jiwoo said patiently, it doesn't violate the laws of physics. It just requires understanding them more completely than most species achieve. She gestured again, and the display showed a human colony ship arriving at a barren star system. Over the course of a few years, the ship transformed asteroids into habitable worlds, created atmosphere from stellar energy, and established a thriving civilization. Our approach to physics is different from most species, Jiwoo explained. When we encounter a law that limits us, we study it until we understand how to work within it more effectively. We don't see physical laws as barriers. We see them as the rules of the game we're playing. Morthek asked a question in a very quiet voice. He wants to know about your people, Hyejin translated. He's asking if all humans are like this. Jiwoo considered how to answer this. Let me show you. The display changed to show various human settlements. In one scene, children were playing a game that involved manipulating gravity to create floating obstacle courses. In another, artists were sculpting with controlled plasma, creating works of art that existed in 4 dimensions. These are just ordinary citizens, Jiwoo explained. The children are learning basic physics manipulation as part of their education. The artists are exploring new forms of creative expression. This is normal human life. Kethvar made a sound of distress and asked several questions rapidly. He wants to know about your scientists, Hyejin said. If these are your ordinary citizens, what do your experts achieve? Jiwoo smiled and changed the display again. This time, it showed a massive structure surrounding an entire star, collecting its energy output. This is one of our smaller research, Projects, she said. Dr. Su Bin leads a team that's investigating the possibility of creating new universes. They've successfully generated several pocket realities for experimental purposes. The aliens fell completely silent. Creating new universes was beyond the imagination of most galactic civilizations. It was the kind of power that had been theorized about but never attempted. How? Morthek finally asked in broken human language, apparently too shocked to use his own tongue. The same way we solve all problems, Jiwoo replied. We refused to accept that it was impossible. We studied the underlying principles until we understood how reality works at its most basic level. Then we learned to work with those principles to achieve our goals. Zuldane asked another question, his voice sounding defeated. He wants to know about your military, Hyejin translated. He's asking about your weapons and defenses. Jiwoo hesitated. Human military technology was so advanced that it might be traumatic for these beings to fully understand it. We don't really have a military in the traditional sense, she said carefully. We have defense systems, but we rarely encounter situations that require force. He's asking why not, Hyejin said after Zuldane spoke again. Because most conflicts arise from resource scarcity or misunderstanding, Jiwoo explained. We solved resource scarcity through matter-energy conversion. We solve misunderstandings through communication and empathy. When everyone can have whatever they need, and when everyone can understand each other completely, there's very little reason for conflict. The display showed human diplomatic teams working with various alien species, helping them solve problems and improve their civilizations. Morthek asked a long, complex question that made Hyejin frown as she listened. He's asking about your limitations, she translated. He wants to know what problems you can't solve, what barriers you can't overcome. Jiwoo thought about this for a long moment. We haven't found any permanent limitations yet, she said finally. There are problems we haven't solved, but we view them as temporary challenges. We're currently working on questions like the nature of consciousness, the origin of the universe, and the possibility of existence beyond this reality. She gestured to the display, which now showed human research stations positioned near black holes, studying the fundamental structure of space-time itself. Some of our philosophers believe that the universe itself might be conscious, Jiwoo continued. Others are investigating the possibility that our reality is just one layer of existence, among many. We have teams exploring the concept of life after the heat death of the universe. Kethvar asked a question that sounded almost desperate. He wants to know how long humans have been like this, Hyejin said. He's asking if you were always so advanced. Jiwoo shook her head. No, we developed these capabilities over time. But the drive to grow, to overcome limitations, to solve impossible problems, that's been part of human nature since the beginning. Even when we lived in caves, we were constantly trying to make tools, improve our situation, and understand the world around us. She changed the display to show the archaeological record of human development. Most species achieve a comfortable level of technology and then maintain it for millions of years. Humans have never been comfortable with good enough. We always ask, what if we could do better? Morthek spoke again, and this time his voice carried a note of something that might have been fear. He's asking if you're planning to expand further, Hyejin translated. He wants to know if humanity has any limits to its growth. Jiwoo considered this question carefully. The truth was that humanity was already preparing for expansion beyond their current galaxy cluster, and beyond that, investigations into other dimensions of existence entirely. We'll continue growing as long as there are new things to discover, she said finally. The universe is vast and full of mysteries. We intend to explore all of it. As Hyejin translated this, the three aliens looked at each other with expressions of complete overwhelm. They had come expecting to catalog a primitive species. Instead, they had discovered something that challenged their fundamental understanding of what was possible in the universe. The massive chamber of the Galactic Confederation fell silent as Zuldane finished his report. 10,000 representatives from across the galaxy stared at the holographic displays showing human civilization spread across multiple galaxies. The silence stretched for long minutes, broken only by the soft hum of translation systems working frantically to process the impossible information. Elder Vox Thalan, of the ancient Krethar civilization, was the first to speak. His voice, normally calm and measured after 15 million years of existence, cracked with disbelief. You are telling us that a species we catalogued as primitive 500,000 years ago has achieved intergalactic expansion, matter energy, conversion and dimensional manipulation? Zuldane nodded grimly. The evidence is undeniable, Elder. I have seen their technology with my own eyes. Their children play with forces that our greatest scientists can barely understand. Across the chamber, representatives began talking among themselves in urgent whispers. The math was impossible. Even the fastest developing species in galactic history had taken millions of years to achieve what humans had accomplished in mere millennia. Morthek stepped forward, his gray skin pale with exhaustion from the journey back to Confederation. Space. Honored representatives, what we witness challenges everything we understand about evolution, technology, and the nature of intelligent life itself. He activated another hologram, showing the human colony ships that had casually departed the Sol system while the Velthari were visiting. These vessels move using principles we cannot comprehend. They create temporary bridges through dimensions we did not know existed. Their speed is not just faster than light, they appear to step outside the normal flow of time and space entirely. Representative Kixthera of the Hegemony Council leaned forward, her insectoid features sharp with concern. What about their weapons? What level of threat do they represent? Zuldane paused before answering. They claim not to have a traditional military. When I pressed them on their defensive capabilities, they demonstrated what they called basic matter manipulation. He showed a recording from his visit to Luna Station, where a human technician had casually converted a piece of metal into a flower, then back into metal, then into pure energy, then back to metal again. This was performed by an engineering student, Zuldane said quietly. She called it a simple exercise in applied physics. The chamber erupted in alarmed voices. Representative Thorak of the warrior clan stood up, his massive frame radiating aggression. If they can manipulate matter at will, their entire civilization is a weapon. They could turn our ships into dust with a thought. That's exactly the point, Kathvar said, moving to stand beside his colleagues. They could have destroyed us easily, but they chose not to. They welcomed us, shared information with us, and treated us as honored guests. Elder Vox Thalan raised a hand for silence. Explain what you mean. Kethvar activated his own recording device showing images from their stay on Luna Station. Look at their behavior. They were genuinely excited to meet us. They wanted to learn about our culture, our history, our development. They showed no aggression, no territorial instincts, no desire to conquer or control. The recording showed human scientists eagerly studying Velthari technology, not to copy it, but to understand different approaches to the same problems they had already solved. Their entire philosophy seems to be based on growth through challenge, Kethavar continued. They don't see other species as threats or resources. They see us as sources of new perspectives, new problems to solve, new ways of thinking. Representative Zarketh of the Trade Federation spoke up. But surely they must have some weaknesses, some limitations we can understand. Morthek shook his head slowly. When I asked them about their limitations, they showed me research projects, investigating the creation of new universes, the nature of consciousness itself, and the possibility of existence beyond physical reality. They don't seem to recognize the concept of permanent limitations. The implications of this statement sent waves of unease through the chamber. A species without limitations was a species without predictable boundaries. How could you negotiate with beings who could rewrite the fundamental laws of physics? Elder Vox Thalan stood slowly, his ancient joints creaking. There is something else we must discuss. The human representative who came to our preliminary meeting. A new hologram appeared in the center of the chamber, showing a young-looking, human man in simple clothing. This was Chan Wu, the human engineer who had volunteered to visit the Confederation capital. He arrived in a ship no larger than a personal shuttle. Vox Thalan continued. When we scanned his vessel, it showed energy readings comparable to our largest battleships. The elder gestured, and the recording showed Qian Wu's casual demonstration of his technology. With simple gestures, he had created complex materials out of thin air, generated localized gravity fields, and manipulated electromagnetic radiation to create three-dimensional images that seemed more real than reality itself. He was not trying to impress us, Voxthalin said. This was simply how he naturally interacted with his environment. For him, controlling fundamental forces was as natural as breathing. Representative Yilvoth of the Scientific Collective asked, the question that everyone was thinking. What do they want from us? Morthek looked around the chamber before answering. They want to help us. The silence that followed was profound. Help us how? Representative Thorak demanded. They offered to share some of their technologies, Kethvar said. Not their most advanced capabilities, but improvements to our current systems. Better energy production, more efficient space travel, solutions to resource scarcity. In exchange, for what? Kixthara asked suspiciously. Nothing, Zildane replied. They said they were offering help because they believe all intelligent species deserve the chance to grow and explore. They see it as a moral obligation. This statement caused another outbreak of concerned voices. In galactic politics, no one ever offered something for nothing. There was always an agenda, always a hidden cost. Representative Morden of the Philosophers' Assembly stood up. Did they indicate any interest in joining the Confederation? When we mentioned the Confederation, they were polite but uninterested, Morthek said. They said they preferred to handle their own affairs, but they expressed willingness to establish diplomatic relations with individual member species. Elder Voxthalin processed this information. So they have no interest in our political structures, no desire to conquer or control, and no apparent agenda beyond helping other species develop. Does anyone else find this terrifying? The question hung in the air like a toxic cloud. A species powerful enough to reshape reality, with no apparent desire for power or control, was indeed terrifying. How could you predict the behavior of beings who operated by completely different rules? Representative Klextar of the Defense Council raised a disturbing possibility. What if their offer of help is actually an attempt to make us dependent on them? What if they're trying to control us by making us rely on their technology? Kethvar shook his head. I don't think that's their intention. When they demonstrated their technologies, they also explained the underlying principles. They seemed genuinely interested in teaching other species to develop these capabilities independently. Which is even more concerning, Elder Voxthalin said grimly. If they're willing to share the secrets of matter-energy conversion and dimensional manipulation, what does that tell us about the technologies they're keeping to themselves? The chamber fell silent again as the representatives contemplated this question. If humans were casually sharing technologies that most civilizations could never hope to develop, what incredible capabilities were they still hiding? Qian Wu's image flickered in the center of the chamber, showing his friendly smile and open demeanor. He looked so normal, so approachable, so harmless. But the casual way he bent the laws of physics around him suggested depths of power that the assembled civilizations could barely comprehend. There's one more thing, Zildane said quietly. When I asked them about other species they had encountered, they mentioned that they had been observing various civilizations for thousands of years. They have been aware of most of us for longer than we have known about them. This revelation sent a chill through the chamber. How many human observation posts were scattered throughout Confederation space? How long had they been watching, studying, learning about galactic civilization while remaining hidden? Elder Voxthalin sat back down heavily. So we are faced with a species that has been observing us for millennia, has technology that makes our greatest achievements look primitive, and has the power to reshape reality itself. And they want to be friends. Yes, Morthek said simply. Métis. The ancestors preserve us all, the elder whispered. The generation ship Endless Curiosity moved through the void beyond the galactic rim, its massive hull gleaming with technologies that bent space around it like water. Inside its vast corridors, Dr. Yunji walked alongside a delegation of alien leaders who had requested to understand how human civilization truly functioned. The ship itself was a testament to human philosophy. It had been launched 200,000 years ago, not to establish colonies or gather resources, but simply to explore. Its mission was to see what lay beyond the known galaxy, to discover what wonders might exist in the vast emptiness between galactic clusters. This vessel has been traveling for longer than most civilizations have existed, Yunji explained to her guests as they moved through corridors lined with observation windows showing the cosmic void. The original crew has been replaced thousands of times, but the mission continues. Elder Voxthalen, who had requested this visit personally, looked out at the absolute darkness beyond the ship. What could possibly be worth such an investment? There is nothing here but empty space. Yunji smiled. That's exactly why it's worth exploring. Empty space isn't actually empty. It's full of quantum fluctuations, dark matter interactions, and dimensional membranes we're only beginning to understand. Some of our greatest discoveries have come from investigating things that appeared to be nothing. They entered a massive observation chamber where human children were attending a physics class. The teacher, a woman who appeared to be in her 30s, but whose eyes suggested centuries of experience, was demonstrating the fundamental forces of the universe. Today we're going to learn about reality manipulation, she said cheerfully, gesturing to create a small star in her palm. Remember, the key is not to fight against the laws of physics, but to understand them so completely that you can work with them in new ways. The children, who appeared to be around 10 years old, began practicing the exercise. Some created miniature galaxies. Others generated complex geometric shapes made of pure energy. One child accidentally opened a small dimensional rift and quickly closed it with an embarrassed apology. Kethvar made a sound of distress. These are children playing with forces that could destroy entire star systems. Yes, Yunji agreed. And they understand the responsibility that comes with such power. Notice how the child who opened the dimensional rift immediately closed it? That's because they're taught from a very early age that power without wisdom is dangerous. She led them to another section of the ship where adult humans were engaged in what appeared to be artistic pursuits. Musicians were creating symphonies that existed in 11 dimensions, their music incorporating gravitational waves and electromagnetic fields. Sculptors worked with controlled plasma and exotic matter, creating art that existed partially outside normal space-time. For humans, the boundary between science and art has largely disappeared, Yunji explained. When you understand reality at its most fundamental level, creative expression becomes a form of applied physics. Representative Kixathara watched a human artist casually restructure the atomic bonds of her medium, creating a sculpture that changed continuously while maintaining perfect balance. How do you prevent such individuals from becoming tyrants? With such power, they could dominate entire civilizations. Yunji stopped walking and turned to face her guests. That's the fundamental question, isn't it? The answer lies in understanding what drives human behavior. She led them to a comfortable seating area, with windows overlooking the cosmic void. As they settled into chairs that adjusted automatically to each species' physiology, Yunji began to explain. Most species see power as a means to achieve security, comfort, or control over their environment. Humans see power as a tool for exploration and growth. We don't want to control others because that would limit our ability to learn from them. Morthek leaned forward. But surely some humans must desire dominance. Power corrupts, as the ancient saying goes. Power reveals, Yunji corrected gently. It reveals what someone truly values. Humans who achieve great power typically use it to push the boundaries of what's possible. They want to solve bigger problems, explore stranger mysteries, create more beautiful art. She gestured to the viewing windows where the darkness of intergalactic space stretched endlessly. Look at this ship's mission. We could have used these resources to build weapons, to conquer worlds, to establish an empire. Instead, we built an exploration vessel and sent it into the void to see what we might discover. Zuldain asked the question that had been troubling many in the Confederation. But what happens when humans encounter a problem they cannot solve? What happens when you meet a truly immovable barrier? Yunji's expression became thoughtful. We haven't encountered such a barrier yet, but I imagine we would be fascinated by it. An unsolvable problem would represent the ultimate challenge. We would probably devote enormous resources to understanding why it couldn't be solved. She stood and walked to the viewing window. You have to understand, failure doesn't discourage humans the way it does other species. Failure tells us we're approaching the edges of our current understanding. That's exciting, not discouraging. Elder Voxthalon joined her at the window. Your people have achieved something that no other species in galactic history has accomplished. You have transcended the normal limitations of biological evolution. What comes next? Yunji was quiet for a long moment, looking out at the stars. We're working on that question. Some of our philosophers believe that consciousness itself is the universe's way of understanding itself. If that's true, then our role might be to help the universe become more aware of its own nature. She turned back to her guests. We have teams investigating questions that most species would consider meaningless. What existed before the universe began? Is it possible to exist outside of reality itself? Are there forms of consciousness that don't require matter or energy? Kethavar shook his head in bewilderment. Such questions have no practical applications. Neither did our early investigations into quantum mechanics, Unji replied, or our studies of dimensional theory, or our research into consciousness transfer. The most impractical questions often lead to the most revolutionary discoveries. A soft chime sounded through the chamber, and the ship's communication system activated. The voice that spoke was warm and familiar. Dr. Yunji, we're receiving some interesting data from the deep space sensors. It appears we've detected structures in the cosmic microwave background that suggest large-scale organization beyond the visible universe. Yunji's eyes lit up with excitement. New structures? What kind of organization? Patterns that might indicate intelligence operating on scales we hadn't imagined. We're still analyzing the data, but it looks like we might have found evidence of consciousness existing at the level of the universe itself. The alien delegation exchanged alarmed glances. Humans had already achieved godlike power within their own reality, and now they were discovering evidence of intelligence operating on cosmic scales. Yunji noticed their expressions and laughed softly. You're wondering if we'll try to make contact with universe-scale intelligences, aren't you? The thought had occurred to us, Elder Voxthalon said dryly. Of course we will, Yunji said, as if it were the most natural thing in the world. If there are forms of consciousness that exist at scales beyond our current understanding, we want to learn from them. Imagine what they might be able to teach us about the nature of existence itself. She returned to her seat, her expression animated with possibility. This is what I meant about human philosophy. When we discover something bigger than ourselves, our first impulse isn't fear or submission, it's curiosity. We want to understand how such things work, what we can learn from them, how we might grow to become something similar. Morthek asked the question that was troubling all of them. What if these universe-scale intelligences don't want contact? What if they consider us insignificant? Yunji shrugged. Then we'll learn from that too. Maybe insignificance is just another limitation to overcome. Maybe there are ways of becoming significant that we haven't discovered yet. The casual way she discussed transcending cosmic insignificance left the alien delegation speechless. They had come seeking to understand human limitations, but instead had discovered a species that viewed the fundamental structure of reality itself as just another puzzle to solve. As they prepared to return to their own territories, Elder Voxthalon asked one final question. Dr. Yunji, do humans ever feel fear? Do you ever encounter something that makes you want to retreat? To hide, to stop pushing forward? Yunji considered this carefully. Fear is a survival mechanism that helped our ancestors avoid danger. But we've learned that the biggest danger is stagnation. The universe is vast and full of wonders we haven't discovered yet. The only thing that truly frightens us is the possibility that we might stop growing, stop learning, stop becoming more than we are. As the alien delegation departed, they carried with them the unsettling knowledge that humanity's greatest fear was the very thing that most species considered their greatest achievement: stability, security, and the end of change. At the very edge of known reality, where the fabric of space-time began to fray into something beyond current understanding, Project Infinity stretched across multiple galactic clusters. The scale was impossible to comprehend. Millions of star systems coordinating in perfect harmony. Their combined effort focused on humanity's most ambitious undertaking yet. Dr. Minho stood in the Central Command Facility, a structure that existed partially outside normal space to accommodate the project's requirements. Around him, holographic displays showed the progress of humanity's preparation for their next evolutionary leap. After 50,000 years of expansion and growth, they had discovered that their universe itself was just one layer of existence. Among countless others, the Velthari delegation, now accompanied by representatives from dozens of other species, watched in stunned silence as Minho explained what they were witnessing. For the past 10,000 years, we've been preparing for dimensional transcendence, Minho said, his voice calm despite discussing something that challenged the very concept of existence. We've discovered that consciousness itself is not bound by the physical laws that govern matter and energy. Elder Voxthalan, who had become humanity's unofficial ambassador to the galactic community, asked the question that everyone was thinking. You're planning to abandon physical existence entirely? Not abandon, Minho corrected. Transcend. Physical existence has been a wonderful phase of our development, but we've reached its limits. The next stage of growth requires us to explore realms where matter and energy as we understand them don't exist. He gestured to the displays showing the massive coordination effort. Billions of humans across thousands of worlds were preparing for the transition. Some were uploading their consciousness to quantum substrates that could exist independently of physical reality. Others were learning to manipulate their awareness directly, preparing to exist as pure thought and intention. Morthek spoke up, his voice strained. But why? You have achieved everything any species could want. You control matter and energy. You've spread across multiple galaxies. You've solved every practical problem that exists. Minho smiled with the patience of someone who had fielded this question many times. Because practical problems were never the point. The point has always been to grow, to become more than we were, to explore possibilities that didn't exist before we imagined them. The display changed to show humanity's latest discoveries. Beyond the edge of their universe, they had detected structures of pure consciousness, entities that existed without any physical substrate, thinking thoughts that spanned eons and creating realities through the simple act of considering possibilities. We call them the architects, Minho explained. They appear to be the beings responsible for creating the fundamental laws that govern our universe. They exist in a realm where consciousness itself is the primary substance of reality. Kethvar made a sound of distress. You're planning to make contact with the creators of the universe itself? We already have, Minho said casually. First contact was established about 3,000 years ago. They've been quite helpful in explaining how dimensional transcendence works. The alien delegation exchanged looks of complete overwhelm. Humans hadn't just discovered universe creators, they had established diplomatic relations with them. They were surprised to find a species that had developed so rapidly, Minho continued. Apparently, most consciousness takes millions of universe cycles to reach the level of development where transcendence becomes possible. Humans have done it in what they consider record time. Zuldane asked a question that sounded more like a plea. What did they want from you? They invited us to join them in exploring what lies beyond even their level of existence, Minho replied. It seems that consciousness is infinite in scope. There are always greater mysteries to explore, larger questions to investigate. The implications of this statement were staggering. If the creators of universes were themselves seeking to transcend to even higher levels of existence, what did that say about the true nature of reality? A soft chime indicated an incoming message. The voice that spoke belonged to Jae-hee, one of the humans who had chosen to remain behind as a guardian for younger species. Minho, the preparation phase is complete. All participants are ready for the transition. We're beginning the dimensional shift in approximately 1 hour. Minho nodded. Thank you, Jae-hee. Please make sure our guests are comfortable. This will be the last time they see humanity in physical form. He turned back to the alien delegation. You're welcome to observe the process. It might help you understand what we've been working toward all this time. Over the next hour, they watched as billions of humans across multiple galaxies began their transformation. The process was beautiful and terrifying. Consciousness separating from matter, thought becoming independent of brain structures, awareness expanding beyond the limitations of physical existence. The humans didn't disappear exactly. Instead, they became something that existed in the spaces between dimensions, visible as patterns of light and meaning that touched the observers' minds directly. As the transformation neared completion, Minho himself began to fade from physical existence, but his voice remained, speaking directly into the minds of the watching aliens. "This isn't an ending," he said. "It's another beginning. We'll continue to explore, to grow, to discover new possibilities. The only difference is that we'll be doing it in realms where physical laws don't constrain us." Jahi materialized beside the alien delegation. She had chosen to remain in physical form to serve as humanity's representative to younger species. "Don't look so worried," she said kindly. "We're not abandoning this reality. Some of us will always remain to help other species develop and grow. That's part of our responsibility as conscious beings." Elder Voxthalan found his voice. "What happens to the rest of us? To our civilizations, our achievements, our struggles?" "You continue," Jahi replied simply. "You grow at your own pace, develop in your own way. When you're ready for your own transcendence, we'll be here to help, just as the architects helped us." She gestured to the viewing screens which now showed empty star systems where human colonies had once thrived. But the emptiness wasn't abandoned. It was purposeful, waiting for other species to expand into those spaces and make them their own. "Humanity's greatest discovery," Jahi continued, "was that the universe is not a finite resource to be hoarded, but an infinite canvas for conscious beings to explore and transform. Every species that achieves transcendence adds something new to the greater tapestry of existence." Morthek asked the question that would haunt the galactic community for eons to come. "How long do we have? How long before we need to be ready? For our own transcendence?" Jahi smiled. "You have as long as you need. Consciousness develops at its own pace. Some species might be ready in a few million years. Others might take billions. Time itself becomes irrelevant when you understand that existence is infinite in scope." As the alien delegation prepared to return to their own worlds, they carried with them the knowledge that humanity had not just evolved beyond their comprehension, they had evolved beyond the need for comprehension itself. They had become something that existed in the realm of pure possibility, exploring mysteries that had no words and creating realities that had no names. The universe felt suddenly vast and full of potential. If humans could transcend their limitations so completely, perhaps any species could do the same. Perhaps the real message of humanity's impossible journey was that impossibility itself was just another barrier waiting to be overcome. Jahi watched the alien ships depart, then turned her attention to the empty star systems around her. Soon other species would expand into this space. They would build their own civilizations, solve their own problems, and eventually face their own moments of transcendence. And when they did, humanity would be waiting to help them take that next step into the infinite mystery of existence itself. In the end, the most remarkable thing about humanity wasn't their technology or their achievements. It was their absolute refusal to accept that any limitation was permanent, that any barrier was insurmountable, or that any possibility was truly impossible. They had looked at the universe and decided that even infinity wasn't big enough to contain their potential for growth.